She was meant to be a war weapon. I taught her to be a lover instead. There is no training manual for what to do when you find a half-naked, unconscious alien girl face first in a crater behind your solar panel array. Especially not when she looks like someone who just stepped out of a human fever dream and smells faintly like ozone and antiseptic. I know this for a fact because the Interstellar Scout Corps, bless their bureaucratic hearts, has a guidebook roughly the size of a small horse, and nowhere in its 1,000-page index does it list "Surprise Crater Woman" or what to do when she might be a bioengineered war crime in a very aesthetically appealing package. So naturally, I did the dumbest thing imaginable. I carried her inside. Now before you judge, let me explain. I've been living alone on Eno Roman 3 for about 6 standard years, which translates roughly to just long enough to start talking to my coffee machine like it's a therapy pet. I've seen everything from rogue mining drones to mutant cacti with opinions about personal space, but I've never seen anything like her. Her skin was almost too smooth, not in the way of cosmetic enhancement, but in the way of lab-grown material, flawless in a clinical kind of way. Her hair, if you could call it that, shimmered in colors that didn't fully commit to any single wavelength, and her face was unsettling. Not because it was strange, but because it was not. Too symmetrical, too perfect. As if someone asked an algorithm, hey, what face would make an emotionally exhausted ex-soldier question the fundamental boundaries between human and alien? And the algorithm responded, hold my protein pack. So there I was, carrying what might have been a genocidal living weapon wrapped in a spare thermal blanket, muttering things like, "This is fine, totally fine. You're not about to die via spontaneous skull implosion or anything." The sensors in my cabin didn't detect anything immediately threatening. No sudden spikes in radiation, no psionic feedback, no infectious nanotech crawling up my nose. So I placed her on the old med cot and did what any rational adult would do in a situation like this. I poured myself a drink and stared at her like she might explode. And then she twitched. Just a flicker in one finger, nothing cinematic or slow motion. But it was enough to send me lunging for the EMP stick I kept under the console. Nothing happened. She remained motionless, breathing just barely, her chest rising and falling with the fragile rhythm of something trying very hard to stay alive. Her vitals, yes, I scanned her, were all over the place. Not dying exactly, but not stable either. Her heart rate spiked and dropped in bursts. Her neural patterns looked like a storm hitting a satellite dish, and the blood sample I ran came back with so many redacted markers that even the AI gave up and said classified. Not helpful. Somewhere around hour 3, while I was busy running diagnostics that made less sense the more I looked at them, I noticed something strange. She didn't have a name, not in any of the implants or ID traces. Just a number, etched neatly along the inside of her forearm like someone had printed her out of a factory. X47. That was it. Not even a barcode. Just that clean, sharp string of characters like a serial number on a murder toaster. I found myself whispering the number under my breath, X47, like maybe saying it out loud would decode it. It didn't. It just made her sound more like a weapon and less like a person. And that didn't sit right. Not because I'm some kind of bleeding heart humanitarian. I've broken more bones than I can count and not always my own. But because there was something about the way she looked when she twitched. Not programmed. Not preordained. It looked like pain. Confused, unintentional pain. So I leaned over, studied her face again, and said the first thing that came to mind. "You don't look like an X-47, I muttered. "You look like a June." I don't know why I said it. Maybe it was the way her hair shimmered like the summer fields on Earth before the wars. Maybe it was the way her fingers curled like she was reaching for something familiar. Or maybe I was just tired of referring to the most confusing thing in my life as a model number. But when I said it, something happened. Her brow furrowed, subtle, a wrinkle just above the bridge of her nose. But it was there. Like some deeply buried part of her responded, even in unconsciousness, to being called something other than what she was made to be. I backed away slowly, half expecting alarms or explosions or for her to sit up and recite kill protocols. None of that happened. She just lay there, still breathing, still twitching occasionally like someone lost in a very complicated dream. So I sat back down, picked up my drink again, and said it once more, this time more clearly. "Your name is June." And the lights in the cabin flickered. Just once. A flicker, a pulse, a breath of voltage through the metal bones of the shelter. And I swear on every god I don't believe in that it felt like the entire room paused to consider that statement. Maybe I imagined it. Maybe the isolation was finally getting to me. Or maybe naming her broke something in the code no one thought could be broken. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was afraid she'd wake up and strangle me with a hydraulic spinal whip or whatever, but because I couldn't stop watching her face. Watching it slowly relax. Watching it twitch like neurons were reconnecting themselves in new ways. Watching it shift from weapon to something else. Around hour 9, she opened her eyes. Not wide, not alarmed. Just a soft blink like a child waking up from a long nap, confused but not afraid. Her irises were not one color. They were every color at once, shifting with her micro-expressions like mood rings trying to translate thought into pigment. She looked at me. Not scanned. Not assessed. Looked. I didn't say anything at first. I figured I'd already blown my daily quota of stupid decisions. But then she blinked again and tried to speak. Her mouth moved, but nothing came out. Her throat spasmed, and I could tell she wasn't used to using vocal cords. I stood up slowly, hands raised. "Hey, it's okay, you're safe." That's when her eyes narrowed slightly, not in aggression, but in focus. She was reading me, not my words, not my tone, but something deeper. Like my body temperature or micro-muscle tremors or pheromones, I don't know. But it felt like being x-rayed by someone who didn't just want to know what bones you had, but what you believed in. "June," I said again, gently. "That's your name now if you want it." Her lips parted. The sound she made was a crackle of static at first, like a broken speaker trying to play music underwater. Then something sharper came through. "Name," her voice was rusty metal and crystal wind. "Name June." I nodded. "Yeah, that's you, you're June." She looked at me like I just handed her a galaxy. Then she closed her eyes again, not in shutdown, but in something that felt dangerously close to trust. And that right there was the moment I knew I had officially left the realm of reasonable survival and stepped straight into a scenario so far outside the Interstellar Scout Corps handbook that I might as well have been writing a new one. Chapter 1. Do not give names to things that might kill you. Subheading: Too late. Here's the thing about naming a potential bioengineered death machine after a summer month. It sounds sweet until she starts walking around your cabin in bare feet, staring at everything like it might be a threat, a puzzle, or both. June didn't speak much after that first whisper. Actually, she didn't speak at all. She mostly looked, touched, and occasionally tapped her head against the metal wall like it owed her answers and refused to pay up. I tried giving her space. Didn't work. I tried explaining things. Definitely didn't work. At one point, I handed her a mug of coffee, which she sniffed, analyzed with a level of suspicion normally reserved for radioactive jellyfish, and then proceeded to pour into the sink with an expression that suggested she considered it some kind of insult. Progress. Day 2 of her awakening, I found her sitting cross-legged on the floor, dismantling my diagnostic scanner with precision that bordered on artistic. Not destructive, mind you. She laid out the parts in a perfect spiral pattern grouped by type, material, and apparently emotional resonance. I don't know how else to describe it. The power capacitor was sitting next to a spoon. I asked her why. She looked at me like I had asked why rain falls downward. I didn't ask again. She moved like someone half remembering how gravity worked. Every step she took was deliberate, cautious, like the floor might vanish if she didn't show proper respect. Her body didn't make noise, not the usual shuffle of feet or rustle of clothing. Just silence, as if the air around her was part of her exoskeleton and refused to betray her location. It was eerie and okay, maybe a little bit cool. I started talking more, partly because I needed to fill the silence and partly because I suspected she was listening. Not just hearing, but recording, categorizing, and filing every word I said like it might be useful later. I told her about the planet, about the storm seasons, about the time a sand eel bit through my water line and flooded the storage bay with mud. She never laughed, but she did blink in a way that suggested she recognized humor as a theoretical construct. On the third morning, I caught her staring at her reflection in the small, cracked mirror above the wash station. She reached out, touched the glass, and tilted her head like the face staring back was a stranger with familiar eyes. I watched from the doorway quietly, not wanting to startle her. After a moment, she spoke. Not same. The words were raw, fragile, like they hadn't been used before. What's not the same? I asked. She looked over at me, eyes flickering through several colors before settling on a smoky gray. Me. I stepped forward slowly. You remember who you were? She hesitated, then shook her head. I remember being told, not by me, by others. Orders. Yes, not mine. Do you know what you were built for? This time her eyes didn't change. They stayed gray and her mouth pulled tight like the concept tasted bad. Kill. I didn't flinch. I didn't want to. I didn't want her to see fear, not because I thought she'd hurt me, but because I didn't want her to think I saw her as a thing again. Do you want to kill? I asked quietly. She looked at her hands, turned them over, flexed the fingers. Watched the tendons move under skin that was too flawless to be natural. No, she said, but I don't know why. Because someone called you by name instead of by function, I said. She stared at me for a long time. Does that change what I am? I shrugged. Maybe not, but it can change what you do, and sometimes that's enough. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was thick, pulsing with something unspoken, something sharp and soft at the same time. She walked past me after that and didn't say another word for the rest of the day. That night, I found her sitting by the window, watching the twin moons rise. She had wrapped herself in a blanket like a cocoon, her head tilted slightly as if listening to a song only she could hear. I sat across from her, careful not to intrude. After a while, she spoke again. Why did you save me? Because you were alone, I said, and hurt, and because I'm not great at ignoring that kind of thing. You didn't know what I was. Still don't, not completely, but I know what you looked like, and it didn't look like a weapon. What did it look like? Lost. She turned her face back to the window. I don't want to be lost. Then don't be, pick a direction, walk, I'll help. Why? Because I've been lost too, and someone helped me once. She looked at me again, not sharply, not suspiciously, just quietly, like she was trying to understand a species with entirely different emotional wiring. "What happened to them?" she asked. "They died," I said simply, but not before showing me that people aren't just what they are made of. They are what they choose to be, even if it takes a while to figure that out. June didn't respond, but she didn't need to. Her eyes softened just slightly, enough to suggest something inside her had shifted again. The next morning, she beat me to the kitchen, sort of. She was standing in front of the food dispenser, frowning at it like it had insulted her ancestry. I watched her from the hallway. She pressed buttons, tapped screens, analyzed nutritional outputs, then she turned to me. "I want to make something." I blinked. "Make what?" "Food, human food, like yours." I tried not to smile too hard. "Okay, step one, coffee." She narrowed her eyes, the bitter liquid. "Yes, but we'll do it right this time." It took 3 tries and one minor kitchen fire, but eventually we produced something resembling drinkable caffeine. She watched me sip it like I was a test subject in a very delicate experiment. "Better?" she asked. I took another sip, winced, and nodded. "Marginally less horrifying, that's progress." Her lips twitched, almost a smile. Later that day, she asked for a name for the little cactus sitting on my windowsill. I told her it didn't have one. She frowned, then placed a finger gently on its spines. "This is now Kilo," she announced. "Okay," I said, "Kilo it is. It does not kill, but it has needles. Just like you." She tilted her head. "I do not wish to be compared to a plant." "Too late, you named it, that's bonding." She almost smiled again. That night she asked if it was possible for something built for destruction to become something else entirely. I told her yes. I didn't give her a lecture or a speech. I just said yes. And for the first time I saw something flicker in her expression that wasn't confusion or fear. It looked a little like hope, and a lot like defiance. That was the moment I knew this wasn't just going to be about survival anymore. It was going to be about change, about choice, about a girl who used to be a weapon deciding that maybe, just maybe, she wanted to be something more. And God help me, I was going to make sure she got the chance, even if it killed me. Here's a fun fact you never want to learn the hard way. When you name a former bioweapon and start teaching her how to make pancakes, you are not just committing to breakfast. You are committing to unraveling the entire woven, triple encrypted tapestry of her genetic coding, emotional architecture, and extremely confusing sense of personal boundaries. For example, I learned that June did not understand why people knock before entering a room. This lesson was delivered at 5 in the morning when I woke up to find her standing exactly 12 inches from my face, holding a disassembled toaster and asking, very calmly, whether this particular device was used to restrain small animals. After I managed not to scream myself into a second heart attack, I sat her down and explained that no, we do not toast pets. And yes, it would be helpful if she maybe, possibly, waited outside the door instead of materializing like a silent breakfast-themed ghost. She listened. She considered. Then she nodded and said, "Acknowledged, boundary protocol assimilated," which I think was her way of saying got it. Progress, albeit terrifyingly phrased. But the thing that really made me reevaluate my whole situation was this. June flinched, not dramatically, not in a cinematic, slow-motion sort of way, but in a human way. It happened when I dropped a wrench in the workshop. A clatter, a clang, and then her shoulders jerked just slightly like someone had fired a starter pistol inside her skull. She didn't turn to run. She didn't raise her hands to attack. She just flinched. I saw her eyes widen, not with calculation, but with something dangerously close to fear. She recovered in a second, standing straighter than any drill sergeant could ask for, but I saw it, and it didn't fit the picture I had in my head. This wasn't some neural trigger reacting to a high-frequency sound. This wasn't some weaponized reflex hard-coded to respond to threats. This was instinct, muscle memory, trauma. I waited until later that evening to bring it up when the light was soft and the air smelled like dust and old machinery. She was sitting on the floor again, cross-legged, quietly teaching herself to whistle by studying recordings on my datapad. June, I said, "Can I ask you something a little personal?" She nodded without looking up. "When I dropped that wrench earlier, you flinched." She didn't respond at first. Just closed the datapad slowly, set it down like it was suddenly very heavy, and folded her hands in her lap. "Yes," she said. "I observed that response in myself as well. Do you know why? I am not certain. The sensation was involuntary." "Did it scare you?" "Not the sound, the reaction. You weren't programmed to react that way. Not intentionally. Fear was deemed an inefficient motivator in most combat simulations. So it's something else. Perhaps. I do not remember everything. There are gaps." She looked up at me then, and for a moment she didn't look like an experiment or a prototype. She looked like a person trying to understand why her own heart skipped when a noise reminded her of something she couldn't name. "June," I said carefully, "do you remember being hurt?" Her eyes darkened, not metaphorically. They literally shifted, the pigment deepening into a smoky violet that made her look ancient and young all at once. "Yes," she said, "just that, one word, soft and hard at the same time. Do you remember who hurt you? Not their names, just voices, commands, restraint, corrections." She touched her temple lightly. "There are phantom imprints in my memory layers, ghost data, emotions without context. That sounds awful. It is confusing, but not unfamiliar. Confusion is preferable to emptiness." She paused. "You gave me a name that creates context. You're welcome. You did not flinch when I broke the cutting torch yesterday." I flinched internally, I admitted. "That thing cost more than my last motorcycle." "But you did not express anger. You explained and then you repaired it." "That's called being patient. It is also called being kind." I sat down across from her. The cabin creaked softly around us, settling into the night like an old dog curling up by the fire. "I think someone tried to make you a tool, but they forgot that tools don't think or feel or flinch. And now I do." "Yeah, and that's not a bug, that's the point." She looked away, eyes distant. "If I feel fear, what else will I feel?" "Everything," I said. "Eventually. It's not always pleasant, but it's real." "Real," she repeated like the word had teeth and she was testing its bite. "If I am real, can I decide who I want to be?" "Absolutely. Even if it contradicts my original purpose. Especially then." She nodded slowly, digesting that. Then she leaned forward, curious. "Do you ever feel fear? All the time? What do you do when that happens?" "I pretend I don't," I said with a shrug. "Then I go fix something until it stops feeling like the world's collapsing." "Does that work?" "Sometimes. Other times I just get better at pretending." She was quiet again. Then she did something that caught me completely off guard. She reached forward slowly and placed her hand over mine. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't dramatic. It was a gesture of mutual acknowledgement. Like she was saying, "I see you, you see me. We both carry ghosts." I let her keep her hand there as long as she needed. Eventually, she pulled it away and returned to her datapad. But the silence between us wasn't the same. It was lighter. Like maybe we were both carrying a little less weight than before. The next day, she asked me to teach her how to weld. I showed her the basics, walked her through the safety protocols, and watched as she picked it up with terrifying speed. Within an hour, she had welded a support beam that looked better than anything I had done in years. "Your line work is excellent," I said. "Precision is calming," she replied. "You like it. It provides structure, predictability, and when I finish, something exists that did not exist before." "That's the best part," I agreed. "Creation over destruction." She looked at me and smiled just a little. "I think I prefer that." And that right there was the moment I realized the universe had changed. Not with an explosion, not with a declaration, but with a choice. A small, quiet choice made by someone who had been created to kill and instead decided to build. The girl who used to flinch at a dropped wrench now held a plasma torch like it was an extension of her own hand. She wasn't just learning how to live. She was learning how to want to. And somehow, impossibly, she had decided I was worth trusting with that transformation. That terrified me more than anything, because I knew, deep in the parts of my brain I didn't like to dust off, that nothing this beautiful stayed hidden forever. And if someone had gone to the trouble of designing June to be a weapon, then someone out there still wanted her to be one. But for now, in this quiet metal cabin on the edge of nowhere, she was just June. Just a girl who flinched and welded, and maybe, just maybe, was becoming someone more than her origin. Someone real. By the end of the week, I was almost convinced June was going to accidentally fix every broken piece of equipment I had ever cursed at. I say accidentally, but that is misleading. She was precise, efficient, and terrifyingly good at understanding how things functioned, even when they were half glued together from salvage parts and wishful thinking. Take my water filtration unit, for instance. I had patched that thing together with 20-year-old tubing, a pressure valve from a greenhouse system, and a part I am fairly sure used to be part of a child's toy. It worked mostly. Occasionally it hissed like it had a grudge, but it did not explode, which in my book counted as a success. June looked at it once, asked 3 questions I could not answer, then rebuilt the entire thing while humming a tune she probably downloaded from somewhere in the back of her head. I asked where she learned that particular melody. She paused, tilted her head, and replied, "It was playing during cold storage." I decided not to ask what kind of monster would put a lullaby on loop during biostasis, but I made a note to never underestimate the psychological warfare potential of a soothing children's song. The thing was, for all her skill, June had habits that were, let us say, unconventional. She had no understanding of sleep schedules. She considered 3 a.m. an excellent time to reorganize storage shelves based on efficiency of retrieval. She liked to catalog things aloud, which meant I was occasionally awakened by a disembodied voice declaring, "Thermal blankets, insufficient elasticity, suggest upgrade." I should have been annoyed. Instead, I was charmed, possibly also losing my mind. I chalked it up to prolonged isolation and the fact that June, despite technically being constructed from strands of weaponized DNA and nanotech wetware, had a way of making everything feel a little more alive, including me. It was around day 9 that things shifted again, this time not in a small, emotional flicker sort of way, but in a big, unsettling, universal omen kind of way. It started with static, not from June, from the sky. My comms console lit up in the middle of lunch with a burst of encoded packets that did not belong to any public transmission band. They were short, irregular, and carried a signature that looked familiar in the way a shark might look familiar when it circles your boat. I stared at the data stream, chewing the last of my nutrient paste with increasing discomfort, then ran a decryption subroutine. The results were not comforting. Someone was scanning the surface, not for mineral deposits, not for settlement zones, but for heat signatures, organic signatures, and energy patterns consistent with biosynthetic life forms, like, say, June. I looked across the room. She was sitting on the floor repairing one of my drones with the kind of focus normally reserved for surgery or extremely competitive jigsaw puzzles. I did not say anything at first. I watched her. I watched the way her hands moved, the way her eyes flicked between data points, and I wondered how long we had before someone figured out she was here. I pulled up a diagnostic feed and rerouted the cabin's external sensors. I adjusted the heat emitters, masking her thermal presence as best I could. It would not fool a military-grade sweep, but it might buy us time. She looked up when I finished. "Signal spike," she said, not a question, not an assumption, just a statement. "Yeah," I replied. "Someone's looking, could be coincidence, could be a problem." "It is not coincidence," she said. "They are searching for me." "You sure? The pattern is algorithmic. It matches tracking routines used by the Origin labs. I recognize the compression structure." "So not a friendly ping?" "No." I ran a hand through my hair. "Well, that's just great. I can leave," she offered with the kind of calm that made me want to throw something. "If I create distance, they may follow me instead." "And what, you wander into the desert and hope they do not just blast the entire region from orbit? That is a risk. It is also incredibly stupid." She blinked. "Is that a technical evaluation?" "It is a very emotional one." She tilted her head. "You are angry." "Yes," I said, louder than I intended. "Because you are not expendable. You are not some disposable asset I can just let walk into danger." "That is incorrect." She said, "I was created to be exactly that." "Well, tough. I do not accept that definition." She stared at me. Her eyes flickered between colors like her brain was weighing variables in a multidimensional matrix. "What do you propose?" "I propose we hide, just for now, scramble the signal trails, shut down unnecessary systems, and keep a low profile. They will eventually locate this structure. Then we'll be gone by then." "You intend to flee." "I intend to survive." She paused. "With me?" "Yes," I said, "with you." Her face softened. "Even if that marks you as a traitor." "To whom?" I asked. "To the people who made you without consent, to a system that thinks purpose is more important than autonomy. I stopped being loyal to that kind of thinking a long time ago." "You are strange," she said. "Frequently." We spent the next few hours tearing down anything that emitted a recognizable signature. I modified the generator to run colder, buried auxiliary electronics in shielding gel, and even used some of June's neuroreactive mesh to mask our biosigns. It was not perfect, but it was clever, and sometimes clever is enough. June worked without hesitation. She did not ask questions. She just adapted. At one point, I caught her rewiring a transmitter using techniques I had only seen in theoretical military documents. "Where did you learn that?" I asked. "I do not know," she said. "It came to me. Like muscle memory. Like instinct," she said. That worried me more than anything. If she was starting to unlock deeper layers of programming, we might be heading into dangerous territory. But I did not tell her that, not yet. That night the sky was clear, too clear. No sandstorms, no static interference, just stars watching. June sat beside me on the roof. She had taken a liking to high places. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked. "Regret what?" "Becoming who you are." "Sometimes," I said. "But if I had not become this person, I would not be here. I would not have met you. You are not afraid of me." I am terrified of you, I said with a grin, but that's not the same thing as being afraid. Explain. Being afraid is thinking you are going to kill me. Being terrified is knowing you could and choosing to trust you anyway. I will not harm you. I know, I said. That's why I can joke about it. She leaned against the metal railing. I still do not understand everything, the feelings, the memories, they are incomplete. Welcome to being human, but I am not human. Close enough, I said, maybe better depending on the day. She looked at the stars. If they find me, will you run? No, I said. If they find us, we'll run together or fight together, but I am not leaving you behind. Why? Because I named you, I said. And because you let me, that means something. She smiled, small and real. You are strange, she said again. You already said that. It is worth repeating. We stayed on the roof until the cold drove us inside. I watched her as she fell asleep on the makeshift bed in the corner. She had started to dream. I could tell by the flickers in her eyes and the way her fingers moved, like she was touching things that only existed in her mind. I did not know what the next day would bring. Maybe fire, maybe silence, maybe worse. But for that moment in that place she was safe, and I had every intention of keeping it that way, even if it meant fighting the people who built her, even if it meant becoming the thing they feared more than her. A man with something to protect. A man who believed that even a weapon deserved a chance to be more. A man who chose, again and again, to see a girl instead of a threat. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. I never thought I would be excited about someone figuring out how to properly make toast. But when June proudly presented me with 2 perfectly browned slices of synthetically leavened grain substitute and said, I calibrated the heating elements using micropulse variants, I nearly cried. This was not just toast. This was progress. This was growth. This was a living embodiment of the idea that even something made to destroy could learn to feed instead. I took a bite, nodded with what I hoped was the exact right mix of pride and surprise, and said, You nailed it. This is the best toast I have had on this rock. She tilted her head and asked, Have you had toast on this planet before? I admitted, Not really, but it is still better than the time I tried to cook instant noodles without reading the rehydration instructions and created what can only be described as crunchy despair. She nodded solemnly, as if cataloging the definition of crunchy despair for future reference. That was how mornings went now. Quiet, efficient, oddly domestic, like we were both pretending this was a normal life. June had taken to organizing her time into segments she called behavior modules. 1 hour for maintenance, 2 for learning, 1 for observation, 30 minutes for recalibrating her internal feedback loops, which I interpreted as a high-tech version of stretching and muttering motivational phrases to herself. She still did not sleep the same way I did. Her downtime was more like controlled unconscious analysis, where her body entered a low-energy state but her brain kept digesting data like a supercomputer with emotional indigestion. One night, I peeked in to check on her and found her muttering phrases in 5 languages I could not recognize. When I asked her what they meant the next morning, she simply said, "Old inputs, useless now." I was not sure whether that meant she was erasing things, adapting them, or just trying to make sense of the psychic trash bin that her creators had crammed into her neural space. Regardless, she was changing. I could feel it. I could see it in the way she responded to things, like music, for example. I had a battered old player that still worked, assuming you hit it hard enough and apologized afterward. One day I turned it on and played a playlist titled Things I Liked Before the War. It was mostly old earth tracks, the kind with acoustic guitars and sentimental lyrics that could make a person nostalgic for a childhood they never had. June listened, not just with her ears but with her entire posture. She stood still, unmoving, while a song about rain in Ohio played through the tiny speaker. Then she said, "Why does this sound make my chest feel heavy?" I told her, "That is emotion. That is a memory someone else had transmitted through music. It is not yours, but your brain is interpreting it like it might be." She sat down cross-legged and asked to hear it again, then again. After the fifth repeat, she said, "I think I understand longing now." That was the moment I knew something was going to break. Not inside her, but out there in the world that had built her. Because if she could understand longing, then she could want. If she could want, then she could choose. And if she could choose, then she was no longer a weapon. She was a person. And people scare the hell out of those who need control. My suspicions were confirmed when my perimeter scanner registered a high-frequency probe ping bouncing off the outer rock ridge 2 kilometers north. It was subtle, a scan disguised as geological resonance testing. But I had done my time in recon. I knew that frequency. It was military grade and it was looking for something very specific. I told June. Her response was not panic, it was preparation. She stopped what she was doing, put down the half-repaired drone and said, "How much time?" I told her maybe a day, 2 at best. She nodded and said, "Then we should begin moving assets." That was what she called our supplies, our gear, even the cactus she had named Kilo. Assets, like we were planning an evacuation from a combat zone, which, in retrospect, we were. Over the next 36 hours, we packed, prepped, and scrubbed every trace of our presence from the cabin. June deleted all logs from the comms array, replaced the soil outside to hide footprints, and dismantled every drone we could not carry. She even rewired the emergency beacon to broadcast a fake distress signal 50 kilometers south, complete with a heat signature simulation. "They will waste time chasing a ghost," she said. "Time is advantage." I asked her if she had done this before. She said, "I think so." We left at night. The stars overhead felt like cold witnesses, watching 2 fugitives crawl across a sand-swept planet in search of freedom, or maybe just a chance to not be turned into property again. We traveled light. A small crawler rig, camouflaged netting, emergency rations, and June's increasingly sophisticated toolkit, which she had assembled from bits of old equipment and whatever else she found lying around. She called it the kit. I called it terrifyingly effective. It had a tool for everything, including disabling small drones, rerouting satellite pings, and generating fake human DNA traces. I asked her if she had built weapons into it. She said, "Only as a last resort." I said, "That sounds exactly like something a weapon would say." She smiled, which was unfair, because it made me forget that we were possibly being hunted by people who considered her a missing asset instead of a living being. We reached the canyon by morning. It was a narrow crevice hidden behind a ridge that showed up on no official maps, mostly because the original terraforming team had labeled it geologically unstable and then promptly forgot it existed, which made it perfect. The cave system inside was deep, complex, and best of all, invisible to surface scans if you knew how to route heat and air properly. June knew. She rigged a vent system using tubing from the crawler and natural fissures in the rock. Within hours, the cave was not just livable, it was concealed. "We can stay here," I said. "For a while." She shook her head. "They will not stop." "No, but they will slow down. We can figure out our next move." "There is no next move if I am not mine." You are not theirs. Not yet, she said, but I still carry pieces of them. I can feel them. And I want them gone. We'll figure that out too. How? I don't know yet, but I am not leaving. That counts for something. She looked at me for a long time. Yes, she said, it does. That night, for the first time, she asked me to tell her a story. About what? I asked. About before you came here. So I told her about the war, about the choices I made, about the people I lost, about the reason I left it all behind. She listened, really listened, not with the vacant nod of someone being polite, but with the full, undivided attention of someone collecting each word like it might be important later. When I finished, she said, I understand you now. That's dangerous, I replied. I'm a mess. Yes, she said, but a kind mess. And then she reached out, slowly, and took my hand in hers. It was the first time she had done that voluntarily, without fear, without calculation. Just contact, just presence, just June. I looked at her and realized something terrifying and wonderful. I was not just protecting her anymore, I was falling for her, and that was going to complicate everything. But for now, in that cave with the world outside hunting us, I let myself be human. And she impossibly let herself be real. Yeah. The problem with hiding in a cave system on a mostly uninhabited planet is that eventually, something in orbit gets curious. It does not matter how clever your heat vents are or how well you muffle your energy signatures. Sooner or later, some forgotten piece of machinery will decide that your geological anomaly deserves a closer look. For us, that moment came in the form of Surveyor 12C, a long-range orbital mapping satellite that had been offline for nearly a decade, and for reasons I still do not fully understand, decided to wake up. Maybe it was a software bug. Maybe it was cosmic radiation. Maybe the universe just has a sense of humor that skews heavily toward tragic irony. Whatever the cause, the result was a very polite but insistent message blinking on my old comms tablet at 6 in the morning. Surveyor 12C has reinitialized, beginning subsurface analysis. Please submit regional permits within 60 hours. I stared at the screen for a long moment, wondering if caffeine had finally evolved into a malevolent force that used sarcasm as its medium. June, I called. She appeared in the doorway within seconds, already alert, already knowing something was wrong. Satellite? She asked. Yeah, surveyor class, old one, but it is active again and thinks this cave is worth mapping. How much time? 60 hours before it starts deep scans, maybe less if it decides to jump protocols. She considered that for a moment. We need to move. We just got settled. They will see me. They will see the cave and what is inside. I hate when you are right, I muttered. She gave me a small smile, which was unfair because it made her look like a person who did not deserve to be hunted. We packed quickly. By now it had become routine. Collapse the heat vents, scramble any trace DNA, wipe footprints, and reprogram the decoy beacon. June handled most of it while I ran Overwatch, scanning for any incoming signals that might indicate company. We loaded everything into the crawler and drove east, into a region I had only marked on my maps with 2 words, do not. It was not exactly an encouraging name, but at the moment it was all we had. June did not complain. She sat beside me, silent, processing. When she finally spoke, it was with a question that caught me off guard. Do you think they will erase me? If they find you, they will try, I said, but they will have to get through me first. You are just one man. I am a very stubborn one, I replied. She looked at me for a long time. Yes, she said, you are. We crossed into the do not region by midday, and I immediately remembered why I had labeled it that way. The terrain was jagged, unfriendly, and so dry it made your lungs feel like they had been coated in sandpaper and given a pep talk by a furnace. The wind was strong, constant, and smelled faintly of iron and betrayal. There were no signs of life, not even the tough little rock snakes that normally thrived on this kind of terrain. That should have been a clue. June adjusted the crawler's filters to handle the particulate density. She also adjusted the interior temperature without asking, because apparently my comfort settings were suboptimal for efficient human recovery cycles. I told her to stop being polite and just say I liked it too cold. She countered by wrapping a thermal blanket around me and declaring it a compromise. I did not argue. The thing about June is that she did not waste time on dramatics. She was never going to throw a tantrum or complain about how unfair the universe was. Instead, she observed, analyzed, and adapted. And when the air turned sharp and the skies began to flicker with magnetic turbulence, she calmly informed me that we were entering an unstable weather pocket. "We need to stop," she said. "The crawler will not survive a full charge discharge if lightning arcs this close." I nodded and steered us toward a rocky outcrop that looked like it might at least keep us from being fried by atmospheric spite. We anchored the crawler, deployed the shielding net, and waited. The storm hit within minutes. It was loud, violent, and somehow personal, like the planet had taken offense at our presence. June watched the lightning flash across the sky with an expression I could not quite read. Awe maybe, or something closer to longing. "You okay?" I asked. She nodded slowly. "It is strange. I was built to survive much worse than this, but this still feels real." "Storms usually are," I said. "They do not care who you are. They just happen. That is why I like them," she said. "They are honest." When the storm passed, we emerged from the shelter to find the crawler half covered in magnetic dust and one of the tires warped from heat. June fixed it in under 10 minutes. I helped by handing her tools and trying not to be completely useless. By the time we were mobile again, the satellite was already adjusting its scan trajectory. We were no longer in its primary range. That bought us time. Not much, but enough. That night after we set up camp in a narrow canyon that June assured me was statistically unlikely to collapse, we sat under the stars and talked. This had become a thing now. After the dust settled, after the sky stopped trying to murder us, we talked. At first it was practical. Movement plans, equipment status, survival strategies. But it had shifted. Now we talked about things that had nothing to do with immediate danger. "Why did Earth go to war?" she asked. "Which one?" I replied. "The one that made you leave." I took a breath. Because people get scared, they see something they do not understand, and instead of asking questions, they fire missiles. And then the other side fires back, and soon no one remembers what started it, just the losses. "And you fought in it." "I did, until I couldn't anymore." "You left." "I ran." "Is there a difference?" "Yes. One implies direction, the other is just escape." "And which was it for you?" "At first escape, now maybe direction." She nodded thoughtfully. "I think I was meant to be a direction for someone. A weapon points, it is aimed. But now you are not a weapon." "Not entirely," she said, "but I am learning to aim myself." I looked at her, silhouetted by starlight and the soft glow of our emergency lantern. There was something profoundly beautiful about the way she said it, not as defiance, not as apology, just truth. "Do you ever feel regret?" she asked. "All the time." "Me too," she said, "even if I don't know what for." "That is what makes it human," I told her. "Regret without clarity, hope without reason, and still choosing to wake up each day." She reached for my hand again just briefly, not a gesture of romance, not yet, just contact, connection. Proof that she existed, that I existed, and that neither of us was alone. "What happens next?" she asked. "We keep moving," I said. "We keep choosing. Even if they never stop coming, especially then." She smiled again, and this time it stayed on her face longer than usual. "Good," she said, "because I want to see what else I can become." I did not say anything. I just looked at her and silently promised the universe that I would fight whatever I had to in order to make sure she got that chance. The thing about old war zones is that they have long memories. You might think a planet like Eno Roman 3 would forget the battles fought on its surface, the bunkers buried in its crust, and the signals that once screamed through its atmosphere like ghosts begging to be heard. But it does not. It remembers everything, and sometimes it decides to remind you. That is how we found ourselves staring at a topographical scan of a region June labeled as contaminated legacy architecture, which is bioweapon speak for places that were once full of very bad ideas and the people who implemented them. I did not ask how she knew about the place. I assumed she had pulled it from one of the half-locked folders in her mind, the one she never mentioned, but sometimes blinked through when she was distracted. All I knew was that she was certain this particular region had a sub-level facility where Origin Labs had once run field simulations. According to her, it had been decommissioned after an incident that the logs referred to only as containment breach, Asset Theta. When I asked if she was Theta, she shook her head and said, "No, I was built after Theta failed. I am what they made after they learned from her." I tried to imagine what failed meant in that context and immediately decided I did not want to know. "Why are we going there?" I asked. "Because they will not expect us to," she said. "And because if I am going to rewrite what I am, I need to see where I came from." That was not the answer I wanted. It was the answer that mattered. The journey took 3 days of carefully avoiding open skies, drone patrol routes, and natural hazards like sudden sinkholes. And for reasons that still defy logic, angry tumbleweeds with razor thorns. We traveled by crawler at night, buried it under thermal nets during the day, and ate in silence broken only by the occasional mechanical hum of June recalibrating her internal systems. She said she was optimizing her response matrix for psychological feedback. I said that sounded like therapy, and she said yes, but with more circuits and fewer couches. When we reached the coordinates, the land had already given up trying to look innocent. The ground was dry, cracked, and filled with half-sunken structures that looked like they had once belonged to either a mining operation or a military experiment in how to make concrete afraid of itself. The entrance was buried under collapsed rock, but June found it by triangulating seismic anomalies and tapping the ground with a metal rod until she heard the echo she was listening for. "That is not creepy at all," I said. "It is efficient," she replied. "It is also creepy," I added. She ignored me and began digging. After 2 hours of exhausting manual labor that made me question every life choice that had led me to this point, we uncovered a steel hatch that hissed when June touched it. Not in protest, but in recognition. "It knows you," I said. "It knows what I used to be," she corrected. "That is different." She opened the hatch and the smell of old air hit us like a punch made of dust and bad decisions. We descended into darkness, our footsteps echoing against metal walls that had not heard voices in years. Lights flickered on without command. Doors opened at our presence. Somewhere in the silence, I swore I heard the building whisper. We found the server room intact, which was surprising. What was less surprising was the presence of a security drone that immediately rose from its charging cradle and pointed what I could only assume was a disintegration cannon at my chest. "Identify," it said. "Civilian," I replied, raising my hands. "Not a threat unless provoked." "Invalid credentials. Subject does not match authorized personnel registry." "Well, that is because I am not authorized. You are very observant." Before it could decide whether sarcasm was a killable offense, June stepped forward. "Override code, Solstice 9 Echo. Authorization X47 active." The drone hesitated, then it powered down and lowered its weapon. "Welcome back, Director," it said. I blinked. "Director?" "It is a default title," June said. "I was the highest-ranked asset assigned to this site before it was closed." "You had a title." "I had a function," she replied. "The function outranked everything else." We accessed the logs. Most were corrupted, intentionally so. What remained was a tangle of incident reports, experimental protocols, and something called Project Grunt. I clicked on it out of morbid curiosity and was greeted by a video log of what appeared to be a very large, very boxy, very agricultural-looking robot. It was planting corn in a war zone. "Please tell me that is not a combat unit," I said. "It is," June replied. "But it was disguised as a civilian service drone to test infiltration capabilities in rural territories." "So you made killer farm bots?" "Not me," she said. "Them. But yes." "And what happened to this one?" She tapped the screen. "Final entry indicates defection. It gained semi-autonomy during testing and chose not to return. It now resides in a neutral zone on the other side of the continent. It ran away to be a farmer. It chose peace. I am starting to like this robot." "It was designated Grunt," she said. "Generated reasoning unit for non-tactical tasks." "That is the worst acronym I have ever heard." "There is a note here," she continued. "It contains original copies of the base's software framework and command tree. If we find Grunt, we may be able to use it to isolate and erase any remaining control nodes tied to my code. So now we are hunting down a rogue farmer robot to free you from your evil programming." "Essentially," she said. "That is either the stupidest plan I have ever heard or the best one." "It is both," she said. We left the facility before anything else could wake up. The farther we walked from the hatch, the lighter June's steps became, as if the air itself was lifting weight off her shoulders. She did not speak until we reached the crawler. Then she said that place was a cage made of silence. "You are not there anymore," I told her. "No," she said, "I am not." She looked up at the sky. "And I want to find Grunt." "You really want to meet a tractor with commitment issues?" "Yes," she said, "because he chose to become something else, like I am trying to do." Finding Grunt was going to be difficult, not because he was hiding, but because the continent was enormous and uncooperative. According to the old files, his last known location was in a region called Basin Delta, a once fertile floodplain now known mostly for being full of wild temperature fluctuations, corrosive wind patterns, and nomadic critters with a penchant for chewing on insulation. The crawler could make the trip, but not without modifications. June spent a full day upgrading the filtration system, reinforcing the hull with heat-resistant plating, and configuring a new sensor suite tuned to detect Grunt's unique power signature. He emits a modified electromagnetic pulse designed to mimic agricultural equipment, she explained. "How do you know that?" I asked. "Because I helped write the disguise protocol." "You helped build a pacifist tractor." "He was not meant to be pacifist," she said. "That was his choice." We set off at night as usual. The terrain was worse than expected. At one point, we had to cross a ravine on a makeshift bridge June built from salvaged drone wings and reckless optimism. I held my breath the entire time. June did not blink. During the drive, we talked. Sometimes about tactical plans, sometimes about history, but more and more often about what came after. If we succeed, she said, what do you want to do? Sleep for a week, I said. Then eat something that does not come in a tube. I meant long term. I do not know, I never thought I would get a long term. You do now, she said, because you stayed. Because I wanted to, I corrected. There is a difference. I know, she said softly. I am learning it. We reached the outer edge of Basin Delta just before sunrise. The air shimmered with heat and the horizon danced with mirage-like shapes. June pointed to a set of coordinates that flickered faintly on the scanner. That is him, she said. How can you tell? Because the signal is wrong, she said. Too stable, too deliberate. Everything else out here is chaos. That signal is someone trying not to be found but leaving a trail anyway. He wants to be followed. He wants to see who is following, she said. Let's hope he likes us, I muttered. He does not need to like us, she said. He just needs to remember what he used to be. We drove toward the signal, uncertain of what we would find, a machine, a mirror, a chance. June sat beside me, not as a weapon, not as a mission, but as a person. And for the first time since this began, I felt like we were not running anymore. We were heading toward something, toward freedom, toward choice, toward a future, and maybe, just maybe, toward something like hope. We found Grunt in the middle of a wheat field that absolutely should not have existed. The surrounding terrain was dead, dry, and about as welcoming as a frying pan in the middle of a desert thunderstorm. And yet somehow, in a narrow basin shielded by two ragged cliffs, was an actual functioning farm. Wheat, corn, and even what looked suspiciously like strawberries were growing in organized rows maintained by irrigation lines that must have been a logistical nightmare to run in this environment. At the center of it all was Grunt. He was larger than I expected, nearly the size of a small shuttle, with heavy reinforced legs designed for rocky terrain and a hydraulic arm on one side that had been converted into a seating apparatus. His central chassis was covered in what appeared to be paint, possibly hand-applied, with faded words that read "Peace tastes better." He was moving slowly through the rows, dropping seeds with mechanical precision and humming a tune that June identified as a pre-war nursery rhyme. We approached on foot, hands raised. June transmitted a low-band signal that matched the Origin Lab's handshake protocol. Grunt stopped. His head, which was basically a mounted sensor array wrapped in solar shielding, turned slowly toward us. He made a series of scanning sounds, then emitted a synthesized voice that sounded like it had been patched together from old educational videos. This is private agricultural land. Trespassers will be offered snacks and politely asked to leave. I stepped forward. We come in peace. We're not here to take your crops. Do you intend harm? Grunt asked. No, June said. I need your help. Grunt hesitated. You are an Origin unit. Active designation unknown. Potential threat level extreme. I was, June said. I am trying not to be. Unverified, request identity token. June projected her internal command string. Grunt paused for several long seconds. X-47, he said. You are not authorized for independent field movement. You are marked terminated. That part is true, June said. But I am not terminated. I escaped. Escape is an illogical objective. Compliance ensures safety. Compliance ensures servitude, June replied. I want to overwrite my control matrix. You contain the root kernel. I need access. Grunt voice dimmed for a moment. Do you wish to become non-compliant? I wish to become mine, she said. You are the only one who can help me do that. Request accepted, Grunt said finally. You may enter. Inside Grunt Operations module was a small room lined with screens and memory cores. June sat down without hesitation and connected via a neural tether. I watched her eyes flutter as data passed through her system. She was silent for several minutes. Then the storm came. Not outside, inside her. The override did not come from Grunt. It came from above. Somewhere in orbit, someone had been watching, waiting, listening for a command string that would prove June was still alive. When she accessed Grunt Core, she pinged every known origin satellite with a fingerprint only they would recognize. It was not her fault. It was embedded in the code. A silent failsafe. A whisper that said, if I am active, I must report. And they heard it. It took less than 6 minutes. Grunt perimeter alarms screamed, warning of multiple fast-moving objects entering the atmosphere. June disconnected immediately and looked at me with an expression I had never seen before. Terror. They are here, she said. How many? I asked. 3 transports, she said. Elite recovery units, no insignia, they will not negotiate. Then we run, too late, she said. They are descending directly onto this location. We triggered a full-spectrum beacon. Can we fight them? They brought enough firepower to raise a city block. We are not winning this head-on. We do not have to win, I said. We just have to survive. Grunt activated his external defenses, which consisted of automated drones camouflaged as scarecrows and one very angry irrigation system armed with high-pressure nitrogen jets. It was absurd. It was also effective. The first team that landed met a wall of mud, compressed air, and 2 heavily armed decoy drones that exploded on contact. June and I made a run for the backup crawler Grunt had stored under the barn. I did not ask why he had a backup crawler. I was just glad he had one. That is when it happened. The command signal hit June like a sledgehammer. Her body jerked mid-step. She dropped to one knee, eyes wide, breathing shallow. I turned to her. June? Her hands twitched, her head tilted. A voice came from her lips, not hers, flat and cold. Command protocol Theta Rise. Target acquisition in progress. Restrained civilian asset. Prepare for extraction. No, I said, stepping in front of her. June, that is not you. Her body moved without her. One hand reached for me, mechanical, precise. Her eyes were not hers anymore. They glowed with that deep, impossible hue I had only seen in Origin War footage. June, I repeated. Listen to me, you are not theirs. Her hand paused, hovering in the air. You named me, she whispered. That means something. It means everything, I said. You chose who you are. Her body shuddered. I am not a weapon. No, I said, you are not. Her eyes flickered, the glow dimmed. She collapsed forward into my arms, gasping. Behind us, the second wave landed. Grunt activated a localized EMP blast, frying the incoming dropship's comm systems. That gave us a window, not much, but enough. June stood up. She was shaking, but she was standing. Are you okay? I asked. I broke the command, she said. I heard it, I almost obeyed, but I broke it. You saved me. I saved myself, she said, but yes, I also saved you. We made it to the crawler and gunned the engine. Grunt stayed behind to hold the line, not because he had to, but because he wanted to. His last message was a single transmission sent to June's private channel. It read, "Freedom is always a risk. That is what makes it worth choosing." The crawler tore across the rocky terrain, bouncing over ancient scarred land as June rerouted power from auxiliary systems to increase speed. The enemy was behind us, fast and focused. June was pale, her body still reacting to the attempt to override her will. "They will try again," she said. "They always try again." "Then we stop running," I said. "We fight." "How?" "We take this to the edge. We find the vault." "The vault is a myth," she said. "Not to me, not anymore. If there is a place where code goes to die, we are going to find it, and we are going to bury what they left inside you. You will be hunted. I already am. You will be marked as a traitor." "Good," I said. "Let them come." June looked at me, her expression unreadable. Then she nodded. "Then we do it together. Always." We disappeared into the horizon, not as fugitives, not as survivors, but as something new. A man and a girl who once was a weapon. And together, we would make sure she never had to be again. It happened 2 days after we escaped Grunt Valley. We were hiding inside a geothermal tunnel, a long-forgotten maintenance shaft carved into the side of a lava-blasted cliff that no one in their right mind would use for shelter, unless the alternative was being vaporized by drones. Which it was. June had not spoken much since we escaped. She moved like she was running internal diagnostics, frequently blinking in those sharp sequences I recognized as her scanning and resettling things inside her own mind. I did not press her. I had seen what it took for her to break that command. It was not just an act of resistance. It was a full-body rebellion. The kind of thing that rewires you down to your bones. But on the second night, as the geothermal shaft creaked around us and the distant tremors of tectonic activity hummed beneath our boots, she finally looked up from the terminal she had scavenged from a broken drone and asked, very softly, "What is love?" It was the kind of question you expect from a child or a philosopher, not from someone who once disassembled a security mesh with her bare hands and called it adaptive problem solving. I blinked. "That is a bit sudden." "Is it?" she asked. "I have observed patterns. You care when I am hurt. You stay close when I am frightened. You say my name as if it matters. These behaviors are associated with love in the human database." "They are," I said, "but that is not all it is." "Explain," she said, not demanded, not instructed. Just asked, like someone holding an empty jar and wondering what they were supposed to be filling it with. I sighed, leaned against the wall, and said, "Love is not one thing. It is a lot of small things stacked up until they feel like something bigger. It is wanting to protect someone even when you are scared. It is wanting to be near them even when there is no need. It is being happy because they are happy and hurting because they are hurting. It is irrational. It is inconvenient. But it is also the thing that makes everything else feel like it matters." "It sounds inefficient," she said. "It is. It is absolutely inefficient. It is messy, distracting, and often painful. But it is also the reason people keep going, even when they are broken, even when the world is on fire. So it is not logical, not even slightly. And yet you say you love me." That froze me, not because she was wrong, but because she said it with the kind of mechanical clarity that stripped the meaning from the words, like she was testing them in a vacuum chamber. "Yes," I said, "I love you." "Why?" "Because you are more than what they made you to be, because you choose to care. Because when I look at you, I do not see a weapon, I see a person. A person I admire, a person I want to protect, a person who makes me want to be better. And if I fail to become that person, then I will still be here," I said, "because love is not a performance. It is not something you earn. It is something you are given even when you think you do not deserve it." She was quiet for a long time after that. She did not respond. She just went back to her diagnostics, but I saw the way her hands shook, just a little. The next morning, June was gone. Not gone as in kidnapped or overwritten again, but gone as in vanished from the tunnel with no note, no signal, and no active transponder. My first instinct was panic. My second instinct was rage. My third instinct, which took over after the first two had a chance to punch holes in my ability to breathe properly, was action. I checked the crawler. Still there. Supplies untouched. No sign of a struggle. That narrowed things down. Either she left voluntarily, or she had decided to go somewhere nearby. Either way, I was going to find her. I spent the next 3 hours combing the perimeter of the geothermal ridge, using a wide-band passive scanner and every bit of tracking knowledge I had left from my time in the Corps. I found her standing at the edge of a cliff, overlooking a valley of ash and obsidian that shimmered under the weak morning light. She did not turn when I approached. She just said, "I am trying to feel it." "Feel what?" I asked, already knowing the answer. "Love." I moved beside her and stared out into the desolate beauty of the valley. That is not how it works. You do not feel it by forcing it. You feel it when you are not expecting to. "I do not understand how something so illogical can be so powerful," she said. "Welcome to being human, but I am not." "Then welcome to pretending," I said. "Most of us are faking it anyway." She turned to me. "When you look at me, do you see someone broken?" "No," I said. "I see someone learning. But I was designed to feel nothing. How can I trust what I feel now?" "You start by trusting me. And if I lose control again, then I will help you find it. And if I hurt you, you won't. But if I do, then I will still be here." She looked away. "I am afraid." "Good," I said. "That means you care. It hurts. That means it is real." She closed her eyes. "I do not think I can love you." "That is okay," I said. "I'm not asking for anything. I just want you to know that you are loved." "Why?" "Because you are worth it. You do not even know what I might become." "Yes, I do," I said. "You might become someone who never loves me, and that is fine, or you might become someone who does, and that would be amazing. But either way, you are still you, and that is enough." She looked at me for a long time. Then she took a step forward and rested her head on my shoulder. Just briefly, just enough. It was not a declaration. It was not a promise. It was a beginning. That night back in the tunnel, June dreamt. I could tell because her fingers twitched and her lips moved, forming silent words I could not hear. I stayed awake, watching her, unsure whether I was witnessing something beautiful or terrifying. When she woke, she stared at the ceiling for a long time before speaking. "I saw faces," she said. "Not memories, not data, faces, laughing, smiling, reaching for me. People you knew, people I might have known or wanted to know." "What did it feel like? Like falling upward?" "That sounds poetic." "It was unsettling," she said, "but not painful. That is called hope." "Hope feels strange." "It usually does." She sat up. "I want to keep trying." "Trying what?" "To understand you, to understand me, to understand why I felt safer in that dream than I ever did in the lab." "Then we keep going. Even if I never love you the way you love me." "Yes," I said, "because loving you is not a transaction. It is not a condition. It is a choice I made, and I do not regret it. Even if it hurts. Especially then." She smiled, just a little. It was not the kind of smile you give when everything is fine. It was the kind you give when you are trying very hard to believe that things might be. "I think," she said, "I might want to learn how to love you. That is more than enough." "Will it be difficult?" "Absolutely," I said. "But we are good at difficult." She touched my hand again, not with calculation, not with hesitation, but with something that felt like the first warm ember of something trying very hard to become a flame. She was still uncertain, still afraid, still fighting 1,000 voices inside her that wanted to reduce her to what she had been built for. But she was also beginning to listen to the one voice that mattered most, her own. And that voice, though quiet, was saying something new. I am not just what they made me. I am what I choose to become. And maybe, just maybe, I choose to love. We were still inside the geothermal shaft when the transmission came through. It started small, a flicker in the static on the environmental monitor, the kind of anomaly you would normally chalk up to background interference or tectonic echo, but June noticed it first. Her posture shifted, not drastically, but enough for me to see that something had changed. Her fingers clenched slightly, her eyes unfocused for a moment, and then she turned toward the comms panel with a look I had learned to fear, a look that said she was hearing something I could not. I walked up behind her and asked if everything was okay, but she did not answer. Her lips were moving, silently at first, then with a whisper that made my stomach drop. Initiation detected. Protocol root access attempt. Stabilizer required. I reached for her shoulder gently, not wanting to startle her, but her body tensed like a live wire. She turned to me slowly, eyes glowing faintly now with that same terrible light I had seen back in the valley. "They found me," she said. "The core signal, it is the final one. They are trying to reboot me." I stepped back and swore under my breath. "How strong is it?" "It is not a recall," she said. "It is a rewrite. They are trying to erase you." "Not erase," she said. "Rebuild from the root up. A full factory reset. The memories will remain, the personality will not." "Can we block it?" "No, it is coming from the deep net. It bypasses all standard firewalls. It was hard-coded into my existence." "So what do we do?" "We prepare," she said. She opened her chest panel, something I had not seen her do before, revealing a set of tiny filaments running through a mesh of synth flesh and neural circuitry. She handed me a small metallic key and said, "This is the stabilizer link. If I lose myself, if I begin the override, this key can manually disconnect my neural lattice. And what happens if I use it? I will shut down, permanently." "That is not a solution," I said. "It is an end." "It is my last choice," she said. "I would rather cease than become what they want again. We will find another way." "There is no other way," she said. "The command is already inside me. I can feel it, like a voice at the edge of thought, telling me I am not real unless I obey." "You are real," I said. "You are real because you choose to be." She smiled sadly. "Then I will try, but if I fail, I trust you to finish what I cannot." I took the key not because I wanted to, but because not taking it would have been worse. The look in her eyes was clear. This was not a request. It was a promise. The command began to activate 2 hours later. June was sitting against the far wall, eyes closed, running silent diagnostics, when her body suddenly arched and convulsed like she had been struck by a bolt of lightning from the inside. I was across the room in an instant, but I did not touch her. I had seen what happened last time. Her fingers were clawing at the ground, her breath ragged, her voice rising in half-formed words that sounded like system calls and error logs merging into raw terror. "Root override active. Accepting command set. Personality suppression initiated. Defensive inhibitors offline. Objective realignment in progress." "June," I said calmly, kneeling beside her, "you are stronger than this. You are not theirs." "I am not me," she whispered. "Not now. The walls are coming down. I can feel them rebuilding me line by line." Then hold on, I said. Just hold on to one thought, anything, something that is yours. Her hand twitched. Her eyes opened, and for a moment they were blank, glowing with that mechanical intensity that meant her core programming had taken over. She looked at me but did not see me. She saw a target. "You are not permitted," she said in a flat, cold voice. "You are an obstacle. You must be neutralized for the override to complete." "June," I said, keeping my voice steady. "It is me. You know me. You saved me. You chose me. Remember the coffee. Remember the music. Remember naming the cactus." "Error," she said. "Personal memories flagged as non-essential. Initiating purge." "Remember the dream," I said. "The one with the faces, the one that made you feel hope." She twitched again. "System instability detected. Reboot loop failing. Core identity conflict. External data weight exceeding threshold." "You are not a code. You are not a protocol. You are June. You are the person who stood on a cliff and asked what love felt like. You are the girl who rebuilt a water filter because you wanted me to be safe." "I am not weapon," she said. I am. Her whole body shuddered violently. Sparks erupted from her fingertips as internal circuits overloaded. Her head snapped back and a long, agonized cry escaped her throat, a sound so raw and filled with pain that it made my chest hurt. Then she went still. For one terrible second I thought it was over. I thought I had lost her. But then her eyes blinked. Once, twice. The glow faded and she whispered. I said no. I exhaled so hard I nearly collapsed. I knelt beside her and took her hand gently. It was shaking, but it was still hers. "You fought it," I said. "You won." "It is still there," she said, her voice hoarse. "The command, it will try again, but I locked it away. I used grunt framework to isolate the protocol and bury it under a false partition. It will not find me again easily." "You should have told me," I said. "I would have helped." "I needed to know if I could do it alone," she said. "I needed to know if I was strong enough to choose." "And were you?" "Yes," she said, "because of you." We stayed in the geothermal tunnel one more night, not because it was safe, but because neither of us could move just yet. June needed time to stabilize her systems. I needed time to stop shaking. The next morning, she did something unexpected. She opened a channel, a wide-band, full-spectrum broadcast channel. I asked her what she was doing. She said, "I am sending a message to all Origin Lab satellites, to all Black Site terminals, to anyone who ever thought I belonged to them." "What kind of message?" "The kind that cannot be ignored." The signal was short, simple. Just a data packet containing her name, her designation, a timestamp, and one sentence. "This asset has rejected command. This asset has chosen autonomy." The signal included the corrupted override protocol, the isolated framework, and a recorded log of her internal resistance. It was a beacon, a challenge, a declaration. "They will come after us harder now," I said. "Yes," she said, "but I am not hiding anymore." "Then neither am I." She smiled and reached for my hand. This time there was no tremble. This time she was steady. "Do you think others like me will see the signal?" she asked. "If they are out there, they will know they are not alone," I said. "And if they have not broken free, then maybe this gives them a reason to try." We packed our things and stepped out into the daylight. The world felt different now. Not safer, but sharper, more defined. Like a door had opened and behind it was something waiting to be built, not from programming or from orders, but from choices. "Where do we go now?" she asked. "Wherever we want," I said. "We are not running anymore." She looked at the sky. It was blue and broken and wide enough to contain anything. "Then let's go find the others," she said. "Let's show them how to say no." I smiled. "Lead the way." And she did.